It's the biggest threat to southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales in 50 years. Category 2 tropical cyclone Alfred is tracking towards the coast slowly, but weather conditions are already deteriorating ahead of the storm. The latest outlook has it crossing between the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast on Friday morning. A number of flood watches are in place with a risk of moderate to major flooding. About 20,000 homes in Brisbane are also at risk of flooding. In New South Wales, more than 200 schools are now closed and evacuation centres have opened across the region. Tonight we have reporters in the impact zone and ABC meteorologist Tom Saunders will break down the latest cyclone modelling shortly. But Will Murray begins our coverage in Brisbane.
As Cyclone Alfred inches closer, his force is becoming more ferocious.
Oh my God.
But it's what comes after the initial impact that's leaving businesses in low-lying areas feeling uneasy.
Today it's really about preparation. We don't necessarily want to see a repeat of what happened in 2022. It went under, like water did flow through the cafe.
Residents in flood-prone suburbs also doing what they can while they still can.
The last flood was about 1.3 metres, but we're hoping that the flood levels don't reach what it did in 2022.
The Category 2 system is set to make landfall early Friday morning, bringing with it destructive winds. A real worry, especially for properties on the Gold Coast, which were destroyed by a rare tornado in 2023.
I don't think there was a house in the street that wasn't damaged by that. The roof got taken off this. This has all been repaired.
The bigger risk, torrential rain that is set to linger for days.
This sort of rainfall is expected to produce life-threatening flash and riverine flooding.
Authorities are extremely concerned that flooding could be exacerbated by storm surges, where water is pushed inland by abnormally high tides. Alfred could bring a high tide more than a metre above its usual level, which could be disastrous for many in low-lying areas. Many island residents off Moreton Bay have heeded warnings to consider evacuating.
The fact that no one can get over to the island once the cyclone hits, so you're there by yourself. It's a scary time.
The most important is human life, and that's what I chose this morning.
But some have chosen to stay.
We were a bit anxious. This will be the first time I've been through a cyclone in my lifetime, and I'm 53 years old. So the unknown's there, of course, but been through floods and things before.
For those in Brisbane with nowhere safe to shelter,
we are initiating a cyclone refuge centre at the RNA showgrounds.
The governments across the board are taking this seriously, and Queenslanders, as well as those on the north coast of New South Wales, need to do so as well.
Public transport in the city will cease tonight and will be shut down till at least Friday. Schools will also close from tomorrow.
I'm pretty happy not to be coming out in this weather to be doing school pick-up or drop-off.
Keeping safe and staying dry, the main priority. Will Murray, ABC News, Brisbane.
Let's bring in our reporter Laura Lavelle from Brisbane. Laura, how's the weather looking right now?
Well, Jeremy, Tropical Cyclone Alfred is definitely starting to make its presence felt here in Brisbane. Over the past few hours, wind speeds have definitely picked up, but it's nothing compared with what we know is waiting just over the horizon. The Bureau of Meteorology's latest forecast map shows the system is currently about 320 kilometres off the coast of Queensland, tracking slowly but surely towards us. At the moment, it's a Category 2 system, expected to remain that way until it makes landfall. The Bureau says that's likely to be sometime early Friday morning. From this evening, we're expecting gale-force winds in some areas. From tomorrow, destructive wind gusts up to 155 kilometres an hour, and especially for those island communities and for areas south of the cyclone's eye. The focus tonight really is those island communities. Those will be some of the first places that feel the impact of Tropical Cyclone Alfred. Dozens of vulnerable residents from those areas have already been evacuated. Now, tomorrow and Friday, schools will be closed here in southeast Queensland, and public transport will also cease for those days as well. Now, emergency evacuation centres and also refuge centres have been set up for those that have nowhere else to go. But the message from authorities is if you are in that disaster area from the Sunshine Coast to the border and beyond, in an area that has storm surges or riverine flooding, consider evacuating and staying with family and friends. Jeremy?
Laura Lavelle reporting from Brisbane. Category 2 Tropical Cyclone Alfred is destined to become one of the most significant weather events in the nation's recent history. ABC meteorologist Tom Saunders explains.
Alfred will bring a multitude of severe weather across several days. This includes storm-force winds, torrential rain and a dangerous storm surge. Alfred is currently 300 kilometres offshore and is forecast to approach the coast tomorrow before making landfall on Friday morning, somewhere between the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast. A Category 2 storm is defined by peak gusts from 125 to 164 kilometres per hour. At this strength, wind is destructive and will cause some damage to homes and crops while toppling trees, which can lead to power outages. Alfred's rainfall will peak from Thursday to Saturday. Heavy falls will extend well down the coast in the onshore flow to the south of the eye. However, rainfall intensity will rapidly decline to the north of the system where the winds are blowing in a drier offshore direction. The system may generate 6-hour totals up to 250 millimetres. That's enough for life-threatening flash flooding, while 24-hour totals could reach 400 millimetres, sufficient for major river flooding. And finally, the wide field of gales is churning up huge waves. They're averaging 6 metres near the border, with maximum wave heights over 12 metres. When combined with water levels up to half a metre above the normal highest tide of the year, the powerful waves will lead to coastal inundation and significant beach erosion.
In New South Wales, hundreds of schools were closed today and thousands of emergency personnel are already in place, ready for the storm. Victoria Pengilly has the latest from this side of the border.
On the state's north coast, a sign of things to come.
Observations from the Coffs Harbour buoy this morning had waves around about 10 metres in the offshore waters.
High winds have already caused the closure of Ballina Airport, with Qantas cancelling flights into Coffs Harbour. More than 230 schools have been closed across the northeast for the rest of the week.
7:30 school got cancelled. Get a long weekend of school.
Some are using the time off to help others move to safety.
We're asking for people to think about relocating on Thursday if they believe they're in a vulnerable situation.
Evacuation centres across the Tweed and Northern Rivers started opening late this afternoon, although authorities are urging people to stay with family or friends if possible.
Because by the time of Thursday evening into Friday morning, it may well be too late.
Social workers are trying to get that message out to the region's homeless population.
I'm in a tent with 2 big dogs, 100 kilos of dogs. I'm worried that it's just going to get ripped apart.
At DIY sandbag locations, supply couldn't keep up with demand. Residents in Murwillumbah resorting to using pillowcases as a makeshift solution.
They'd run out of sandbags and they were hoping for a truck to come. And I started thinking, what about pillow slips? So I went to St Vinny's and bought a whole heap of pillow slips.
Nearly 150,000 extra bags are en route, but businesses say they've already lost valuable time.
Well, I am a little frustrated about it, and there are a lot of businesses in the firing line.
The wind and rain is really starting to set in here, and farmers also aren't taking any chances. Some of them have made the extraordinary decision to move and park expensive equipment and machinery right up on this hill outside of Murwillumbah, hopefully out of harm's way. The State Emergency Service is sending teams north from across the state. More than 2,000 members are already on the ground. Federal help is also on the way, with a national heavy lift helicopter pre-positioned in Coffs Harbour. Our specialist firefighters trained in water rescues are ready to act. Some locals managed to squeeze in one last swim.
We might have to skip a day or two. We'll have a look how it is.
Coffee day tomorrow.
Coffee and somewhere dry. The order of the day. Victoria Pengilly, ABC News.
Residents across the state's Northern Rivers region are being told to expect destructive winds and heavy rain. Sean Turek Goodwin is in Yamba for us tonight. Sean, how is the community there preparing?
Well, locals, particularly those who live in low-lying parts of the Clarence River region here, are finishing off their last-minute preparations, and that's happening in communities right along the northern coast of New South Wales. The community of Yamba here, there's a particular sense of uncertainty. This community of about 6,500 people is expecting to be completely cut off if the Clarence River rises, and that's expected to do so. It was isolated for 6 days during the 2022 floods. This time around, the community says it's determined to be as prepared as possible.
I think people are just starting to come together and make sure that everyone's safe.
We've got some sandbags. We got some yesterday, some more this morning. We're kind of just piling up outside the garage door.
The Yamba community is pretty resilient. They're used to being cut off, especially the people that have been here for a while, and they just bunker down and just get on with life.
The State Emergency Service says it's preparing to deliver supplies to any communities that do become isolated, but anyone who's considering relocating temporarily should do so before it's too late.
Sean Tarrant Goodwin live in Yamba. Further north, some towns are still recovering from the 2022 flood disaster. Thousands of homes and businesses there were ruined and many haven't finished rebuilding. But some business owners are hoping they can learn from experience when the cyclone arrives.
This time 3 years ago, Woodburn was almost completely underwater.
There's still a lot of trauma, and if you drive around town, you'll still see that there's a lot of houses that still aren't even rebuilt.
Sandra Peters runs a bakery in the town. She and her staff will be keeping locals stocked up before evacuating at 2 p.m. tomorrow.
We're doing bulk bread, so our bakers are starting 5 hours early tonight to do bulk bread and bulk pies.
Thousands of Lismore homes and businesses were destroyed by the 2022 floods. Mayor Steve Krieg had been in office for a matter of weeks.
I threw everything that I had into trying to protect Lismore, but I was made very acutely aware that I put the city first and my family second.
This time, he's more conscious of protecting his family. They live above his restaurant, which he opened in a new Lismore location after the old site was flooded.
It was a gamble, no other way to describe it.
This concrete levee protects the Lismore CBD, but in 2022, floodwaters went nearly 4 metres above it. The SES says it's preparing for the possibility of water to go over it again this week, but it's putting measures in place to protect residents.
If our levee was to overtop this week, I just don't know how many of our businesses will be able to take that.
Organisation Resilient Lismore helps to rebuild disaster-damaged homes.
We will swing into action as soon as we can after the event. This is something that happens in our community. None of us like it, but we know how to do it.
Preparing for the worst while still recovering from it. Emma Rennie, ABC News, Lismore.
And if you're in an affected area and need local advice or emergency information, tune into your local ABC radio station or visit the ABC's emergency website. You can find your local frequency at abc.net.au/emergency or listen via the ABC Listen app. And that website also has plenty of useful information about how to prepare for natural disasters.